We will let Malika get started.
All right, thank you, Jen. Hello, everyone. My name is Malika Jayaraman. I'm a senior managing consultant at Illume and the project manager for the Illinois Solar for All evaluation. I'm here to share results of our evaluation of the 2022 to 2023 program year, or as we'll refer to it in this presentation, program year 5. We covered a lot of ground with this evaluation. So we're going to keep things at a pretty high level today. However, I encourage you to look at our report for detailed insights. We'll also have a comment period and comment form associated with this webinar if we don't get to your questions or comments today. Some other notes, I want to acknowledge that the 2022 to 2023 program year concluded a few years ago. The program is currently in program year 7. We're currently in the process of wrapping up our program year 6 report, which covers 2023 to 2024, and anticipate conducting the webinar for that within the next couple months. So we're working on catching up with the evaluation to where the program is currently. I also have several of my colleagues on the phone to make sure we're able to answer any questions that come up during the webinar today. These include our partners at Verdant and Industrial Economics. For the sake of time, I'm not going to introduce our whole team now, but team, please feel free to introduce yourself in the specific part of the evaluation you worked on. If you come off mute to answer questions, or if you respond to anything in the chat. Okay, so this slide shows our agenda for today. We'll start with some details on our approach for the program year 5 evaluation and then jump to results. IPA will also share some information about how they're incorporating the evaluation results into future program years. And then finally, we'll conclude with a Q&A and some time to share next steps. We have several ways to provide input during this presentation. This includes entering questions and comments into the chat. I'll also try to pause periodically throughout the presentation for questions. We anticipate having a 10 to 15-minute Q&A period at the end of the call. And finally, you can also submit comments after the call, either through email, which the email is listed on the slide, or through our online form, which is open on an ongoing basis. And the link for that online form has also been added to the chat. All right, so before we dive into the results, I wanted to share a few details on our approach. So one of our main objectives as the evaluator is to understand whether Illinois Solar for All is accomplishing its goals. So to do this, we start with the overall objectives of the program, which we've included on this slide, and include bringing solar to low-income communities, creating a long-term low-income solar marketplace, coordinating with existing energy efficiency initiatives, and minimizing administrative costs. So based on these goals, our role as the evaluator is to look at how well the program is accomplishing these goals and delivering long-term benefits to individuals and communities. We also recognize that accomplishing these goals requires coordination among many different organizations and individuals. So we aim to understand how all these perspectives fit together to make the program work. Ultimately, we want to provide an independent third-party perspective on what benefits the program is delivering, how efficiently and effectively it's doing so, and what the program needs to be successful. The other key item we use to guide our evaluation work is the objective criteria listed on the right of the slide. This criteria was developed through a public stakeholder process and serves as a consistent set of metrics and criteria to assess how the program is doing over time. Let me see if I can get rid of this. There we go, bar on the top of the screen. Okay, this slide provides an overview of the specific areas of analysis we looked at for the program year 5 evaluation. Our evaluation can be grouped into 2 categories: process evaluation and impact evaluation. The process evaluation focuses on assessing the performance of the program administrator, Elevate, as well as the overall program operations, and gathering perspectives on the program from the different organizations and individuals who interact with the program. Our impact evaluation focuses on estimating the impacts of the program on different systems. These include electricity impacts or how the program impacts the grid, environmental impacts or the program's impact on reducing air pollution, social impacts, which include the benefits delivered to communities, which communities receive benefits, and where those communities are located throughout the state. We also look at the program's impacts on participant bills, as well as the program's impacts on the Illinois economy and jobs. Related to the impact evaluation, I wanted to note that most of our impacts are modeled due to limited available data to assess actual impacts. So this slide shows all the actors involved with the Illinois Solar for All program. For the program year 5 evaluation, we collected a lot of input from grassroots educators. We also spoke to job trainers, job trainees, and other community organizations who are not involved with the program in a formal capacity, but who still interact with the program in either through providing information to their community about the program, or through some of the kind of non-core initiatives related with the program. So they still provided input on our evaluation in program year 5, and we refer to them as non-participating stakeholders. For the program year 6 evaluation, we'll be speaking with approved vendors and participants, so that feedback is coming up in our next webinar. A few other notes. Given the timing of our evaluation, when we spoke to program actors, we asked them both about their experiences with program year 5 and program year 6. We didn't want to kind of limit our questions for them to just program year 5. Since we had the one opportunity to talk to them, we wanted to gather as much feedback as we could. So while the results are included in the program year 5 evaluation, they're relevant to both program years. And then finally, grassroots educators were really one of our key sources of information for this evaluation, and they primarily provided feedback to us on the community solar and residential solar small sub-programs. So you'll see a lot of our findings focused on those two sub-programs. Okie dokie. And I'll quickly pause just to see if there are any methodology questions.
Nothing in the chat so far.
Okay, I will go ahead and dive into our results then. Okay, so this slide summarizes the budgetary performance of Illinois Solar for All in program year 5. So basically we look at this to determine what percent of the subprogram budget is actually awarded in a program year. And the budget being awarded means that the vendor has funding from the program and can begin constructing the solar array, which will eventually deliver benefits to participants. When we see budget unawarded, it's usually because not enough projects meeting program requirements applied in a given program year, or in some cases, not enough projects applied that met the specific budget carve-out requirements. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. So in program year 5, the nonprofit public facility portion of the program awarded almost all of its budget. The community solar portion of the program awarded 85% of its budget, and some funds were unawarded because they're set aside specifically for projects in environmental justice communities, and not enough projects in environmental justice communities applied to use all these funds. So per program requirements, those funds were held for the remainder of the program year and then rolled over to the next program year. The residential solar subprograms awarded 10% of their budget, and in program year 5, this was comprised entirely of projects in the residential solar small subprogram, which serves 1 to 4 unit buildings. So we did not see any approved projects in the residential solar large subprogram, which serves buildings of 5 units or more. And just a note that the trend of lower participation in the residential solar subprogram is similar to previous years, when the program has also struggled to allocate its entire budget. Since unused budget is rolled over year between subprograms, there's also some unused budget from prior program years included in the program year 5 budget. So that's part of what drives the lower incentive allocation. I do want to note that there were several projects submitted to the residential solar small sub program in program year 6, and that was a large number of projects that were submitted by a single vendor. So the activity in this sub program has picked up in recent years. Any questions on this? Okay, I'll keep us moving. So now I'm going to share some of the overall impacts of the Solar for All program. Before I do, I wanted to share the two views we use to look at impacts. So the two views we look at when we're looking at program impacts are approved projects and energized projects. In short, approved projects are all projects that are awarded funds in a program year. So these funds are set aside for vendors to be able to begin construction of solar arrays. By contrast, energized projects are fully energized and constructed by the end of the program year, meaning that they're connected to the grid and delivering benefits to participants. Importantly, part of our energized definition that we use includes that the project has been Part 2 approved, which means that the renewable energy credit or REC incentives have been fully paid out to vendors. So that's just an additional nuance for how we look at energized projects within our evaluation. And the other note I want to make about energized projects is that these impacts are cumulative, so they include approved and energized projects from prior program years in addition to the current program year. In most cases, our team looks at approved impacts because this aligns with how IPA and Elevate report out program activity year over year. However, project cost data is usually not fully available until projects are energized. And so we largely look at things like bill impacts and economic impacts in terms of energized projects. And throughout our presentation, you can look for these two icons to see if you're looking at an approved impact or an energized impact. Okay, so this slide gives some quick statistics about the overall impacts of the program in Illinois, and we'll break this down by subprogram in future slides. I won't read all of the impacts of the program, but wanted to note that approved projects in program year 5 will add over 17,000 kilowatts of new solar capacity to the electric grid. And looking at energized projects, these projects are estimated to generate almost 40 million in bill savings over the lifetime of these systems. So pretty substantial impacts at the state level. This slide summarizes some of the successes, challenges, and recommendations for Illinois Solar for All in program year 5. We found that while the program grew and made improvements to design and processes, there were also some challenges with program delivery, including a delayed start to the program year and gaps in staffing at the program administrator. So some of the successes in program year 5 included receiving additional funding from the passage of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, also known as CEJA. The number of projects approved through the program also grew between program year 4 and program year 5. And the program administrator was able to make some improvements to the program design and processes. Some of those were in response to changes due to CEJA, and some of those were in response to feedback that they received from approved vendors. We did also hear about some challenges that the program experienced, and these included delays to the start of the program year due to needing to implement some of the program design updates resulting from CEJA. The program administrator also noted that there was a key staff member who was on leave of absence during program year 5, which contributed to challenges with strategic oversight and delivery of the program. Some of our recommendations related to these challenges include ensuring to communicate schedule changes or delays to all program actors. We really heard across the board that these projects in this program take many, many months to plan. And so delays to the start of the program can really impact the ability of different actors to conduct activities related to promoting the program and getting people enrolled. We also recommend ensuring that the program administrator builds redundancy in staff and processes so that the program can operate smoothly in the case of a leave of absence. And something that the program administrator noted that they've been focused on in program year 6 is the development of standardized operating procedures to help new staff get up to speed on the program more quickly. Okay, and then I will briefly pause here for any questions about the program overall.
Nothing in the chat yet.
Okay. Sounds good. Um, so this next slide specifically outlines the energy sovereignty portion of the program, and how it works and how it performed in program year 5. So energy sovereignty was a new program goal in program year 5. 25% of the funds of each subprogram are, as of program year 5, held annually to promote projects where the participant will eventually own the solar array. And the goal of this is to build community wealth by allowing people to realize additional benefits resulting from the ownership of projects. So in program year 5, both the community solar and nonprofit public facility subprogram used either all of their energy sovereignty funds or almost the full carve out of energy sovereignty funds. However, the residential solar small subprogram only had 2% of approved project funds go to energy sovereignty projects. And based on conversations with Elevate, energy sovereignty was a harder goal to implement overall and required several changes to the program. But despite kind of some of the complications associated with this, there were still several projects that applied within community solar and nonprofit public facility. However, for residential solar small, something that we heard from both IPA and Elevate was that it was harder to make this aspect of the program appealing for participants. And the reason for this being that the participants in Illinois Solar for All can already access solar for no upfront costs and minimal ongoing costs over time. And so when you're looking at a lease model versus an ownership model, you're essentially seeing very similar participant benefits, but ownership requires some additional responsibilities, including maintenance of the system and figuring out what to do with the panels if the participant moves or when the panels have reached the end of their lifetime. So this is kind of the hypothesized reason for lower participation within the residential solar segment. And I'll just keep moving since it sounds like we're still not seeing questions. So our next few slides summarize some of our overall findings pertaining to the grassroots educator portion of the program. Overall, while grassroots educators really emphasized to us that they wanted to see Illinois Solar for All succeed and they really appreciated the program, they also generally requested more support from the program in conducting their activities. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, grassroots educators are community-based organizations who are funded through a competitive grant process, and they're responsible for educating potential participants about solar and raising awareness of Illinois Solar for All. In our conversations with grassroots educators, we learned not only do they support with raising awareness, but they also undertake a variety of activities to support participants throughout the participation process. And on the slide, you can see some of the specific activities they do to support both outreach and education, as well as handholding participants as they progress through the overall participation process. This slide outlines challenges that the grassroots educators encountered with Illinois Solar for All. These largely pertain to communication and wanting more support from the program. So some of the specific challenges that grassroots educators described were wanting more support with materials to promote the program, wanting to see faster response times, and better ways to provide feedback to the program administrator. They also wanted support in helping participants navigate some of the common barriers to participating in the program. One that specifically came up was a lack of approved vendors or approved vendors not being responsive. And then another one that was mentioned was just limited community solar subscriptions and challenges being able to connect people with available community solar subscriptions. Finally, they requested more support with program data tracking requirements and entering those data into the program portal. On the right side of the slide, we offer some specific suggestions to help support grassroots educators in addressing these challenges. And another thing I wanted to note was that grassroots educators have noted that communication has improved with Elevate in recent program years. But yeah, some of the specific kind of materials they requested included testimonials and success stories, less text-heavy materials and materials available in more languages. They also requested event attendance by Elevate, more standardized communication, again, support with addressing those program barriers and more technical support for Salesforce. Okay, so I am about to dive into some of the sub-program findings. I'm just going to pause again and see if there are any questions coming through in the chat.
Nothing has come through yet.
Okay, sounds good. I did just see a question pop up asking about specific languages that grassroots educators requested materials in. I know Spanish came up as one that was specifically requested. And if my colleague Miriam is here, I don't know, Miriam, if there were any others that came up in addition to Spanish.
Hi, this is Miriam from Illum Advising. Spanish was the main one that came up in our interviews.
Okay, cool. Thank you for confirming. Okay. So next I'll talk about some of our findings specific to the sub-programs. And for this presentation, I'm focusing on the sub-programs with approved projects in program year 5. So that's residential solar small, community solar, and nonprofit public facilities. You can find findings for all of the sub-programs, including residential solar large, in the full report. So I'll begin by reviewing impacts for the residential solar small subprogram. As a reminder, this is the subprogram serving 1 to 4 unit buildings. So the bottom half of this slide shares some impacts for residential solar small, but I'm actually going to skip ahead to the next slide where we summarize kind of what those impacts mean. So overall, we found that residential solar small tends to have higher barriers to entry to participate than other subprograms serving the residential segment, mainly community solar. However, participants who successfully participate in this program realize higher bill savings than those in the community solar subprogram. So within residential solar small, we see bill savings of around $95 per month, and that's about 86% of participant bills. We also find that this sub-program is more concentrated within Northern Illinois, and we kind of use utility service territories as a proxy for geography. So we see about 86% of projects located within ComEd's service territory, which again is the utility serving the northern part of the state. Overall, this subprogram comprised 9% of the capacity installed through Illinois Solar for All in program year 5. So it's an overall smaller portion of the program savings. This slide summarizes some of the factors that drive that more challenging participation process in the residential solar small subprogram. And the main ones that we heard about include getting homes solar ready, finding approved vendors, and then we also heard the income verification process can be challenging. We also heard from grassroots educators that they attempt to support participants with these steps in a variety of ways, but that people are still facing challenges to participating. So on the right of the slide, we include some of the suggestions our team developed to help support grassroots educators in helping people participate in residential solar small. And these largely pertain to supporting grassroots educators and understanding program processes so that they can pass that knowledge along to program participants to help them navigate the overall participation process. And then the other big area we heard grassroots educators requesting support was helping them connect participants to approved vendors. So we have some suggestions related to that as well. Finally, I wanted to note that for participants whose homes are not yet solar ready, there was a new initiative started in program year 6 called the Home Repairs Initiative, which aims to help connect people to funding to get their homes solar ready. So this is one potential option for people who are having difficulties accessing the residential solar small sub program. However, we did also hear that some participants just, don't have homes that are suitable for rooftop solar. And so for those folks, the community solar sub program is also an option. So this leads us into our next sub-program, community solar. So this sub-program allows homeowners or renters to subscribe to an off-site solar array and still realize the financial benefits of solar without having to install it on their property. So unlike residential solar small, grassroots educators reported a relatively smooth experience for community members who are able to participate in the community solar sub-program. One thing we noted in our evaluation is that due to differences in the way participants receive credits for rooftop and community solar participants tend to realize smaller benefits than rooftop solar participants. So they see an average bill savings of $73 per month, or about 50% of their bill. And this is something that is not dictated by the program. It's dictated by just how rates are designed within Illinois. However, we do see that 50% of the new capacity installed through the program in program year 5 came from community solar. So while the household level benefits are a little bit smaller, the program's able to reach a much larger number of households through this sub-program. Also, we're seeing 80% of projects located outside of ComEd service territory. So yes, that largely, I'm seeing a question in the chat about that. That largely means Ameren, Illinois. There's also some munis and co-ops in the southern part of the state that are not served by ComEd. So yeah, we're just looking at the number of projects located outside the ComEd service territory as a proxy for how well the program's reaching the central and southern parts of the state. So here we're seeing both a larger number of projects located outside the territory. And then in program year 6, we also look at the number of subscribers and where they're located. I'm sorry, I'm seeing more questions in the chat. I will briefly. Can somebody read out the question? Sorry, I'm
Sure.
not able to see it super well on my screen.
Sure. So this is a follow-up question from Theo. She was asking if the evaluation determined that the projects were located outside of ComEd. Is it because of the nature of community solar needing acreage of land, or is that because of something else?
I will let others jump in if they have a more specific answer on this. I don't think we looked specifically into like available acreage of land throughout the state, but I'll just say that generally speaking, we would expect to see more community solar projects outside of urban areas because they do require that larger amount of land.
Right.
So yeah, that is not a specific part of our analysis, but I think is an expected trend.
Okay, the reason I asked though, hi, this is Thea. The reason I asked though is because, the common territory, of course, you have like Chicago metropolitan area, but north of Chicago, I'm based in Chicago, you have Lake County and other rural areas. So I'm just theorizing, potentially why like 80% is a large number that was located outside Chicago of Comet service territory, I should say. So yeah, I'm just wondering if there was any other determination, like could it be interconnection issues, just curious. Because I know just with the nature of the Illinois Solar for All program, in the past, community members have talked about wanting to see more CS in their community overall. And these are like EJ communities, Chicago. So just curious, if there was like any additional information you can add to kind of tease out that finding.
For sure. Yeah, so I will say that 80% figure is based on the number of projects. And as of program year 5, there were only 5 approved projects in the program, and this is based on the approved projects. Sorry for flipping and back and forth here. So yeah, it's a small number of projects to begin with, which I think is part of what is making that percentage look high. But yeah, hearing, of course, that Northern Illinois is not entirely comprised of Chicago. I don't know if, again, I will kind of see if my team has any input on like some of our program year 6 figures, like the number of subscribers that we're seeing located in different parts of the state. I don't know if we have that figure readily available.
And the other thing, it could also be just from the project development standpoint. So maybe this is where the approved vendors may be able to have more insight to spot.
Malika, this is Bahore with Illinois Advising. I want to actually say a few great question. I saw Sarah also put a question in chat. Actually, when we saw the result coming at PY5, we made a recommendation that this actually worth looking into that. It was not part of our, I want to say, key research question and the area that we needed to investigate. The first community solar started subscription end of PY4. So it's definitely a new thing for the program, and we recommended that there could be different factors. There could be land, there could be actually the capacity of network and getting interconnection, how busy it is. It could be the business development model, and there could be again 4 or 5 different reason or hypothesis that we can have, and it definitely worth including it in the future program year and asking ABs and getting a better insight. So great question. And we also noted that it's worth looking at this specific, because there are different factors that could play in developing a community solar.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Hi, this is Sergio from Alium Advising, senior consultant. I was gonna reply to the question about how does that impact geographic spread of subscribers. That's something that we don't have a view of that at the moment. We don't have subscriber data for PYCs, but that's something like we will be looking in the future, and we can probably give an overview of like, yeah, these were the spread of the projects. This is the spread of subscribers, and see how that compares across territories.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying that. I'm sorry, yeah, I misspoke. So we did look into whether we could get subscriber data for program year 6, but due to the long construction period for the community solar projects, they often acquire subscribers like several years after they're approved through the program. And so we had been hoping to look at the kind of location of subscribers in our program year 6 evaluation, but we weren't able to because the vendors had not yet started acquiring subscribers for any projects approved after program year 3. Okay. Were there any other
Sorry,
questions?
I have
at this?
another quick question. From the grassroots educator standpoint, I'm wondering if they maybe, so how do I formulate this question? So, if 80% of projects were located outside of ComEd, right? Meaning for community solar, does that mean the grassroots educators in the ComEd territory were not talking about community solar to their residents, and we're more, educating them on residential solar, or did they talk about both?
I'll quickly,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I saw a bunch of people come off of mute all at once. I'll quickly say, I don't think that's the case. I think the grassroots educators we spoke to try to kind of tailor their recommendations to their communities based on the sub-program that they think people will be most likely to be able to participate in. So if they, for example, like know that there aren't any available community solar subscriptions in their area, they might not be promoting that to their communities, but that's kind of more of a supply related issue. I will say, I think something we heard from grassroots educators is that there was actually some concern that like not enough projects were being installed outside the ComEd service territory. So that's part of the reason why we wanted to look across the different sub-programs and see, it seems like residential solar small has kind of that stronger presence within Northern Illinois, whereas community solar is maybe a better solution for folks who are not in urban areas, because there is just kind of an economic challenge that exists for approved vendors to reach people in more rural areas with things like residential solar. And that's due to some like materials and travel costs. So I wanted to make that point. And then, yeah, also just note that this is like a snapshot of program year 5. And I do believe there have been more projects in Northern Illinois in like more recent years of the program. Did anybody have anything to add beyond what I just said?
I think this is Jen Schmidt. I'm the Senior Program Manager of Illinois Solar for All at the IPA. And I would just agree, Malika, the thought I had was that, these are projects that were approved in this year, and the build time for most of these community solar projects is, 2 to 3 program years. So we wouldn't expect the projects that are approved in PY5 to be coming online in the same year. And I did a quick look on the dashboard, and it looks like, we did get in PY6, we had 3 community solar projects in Ameren and 2 in ComEd. So that small number of projects really can be greatly impacted. The divide between Ameren and ComEd can really be strongly impacted by, just one project.
Thanks for that additional context. I'm going to keep us moving, but definitely if we want to continue discussing this in the Q&A period, we can. Okay. I think I had covered all of this. Oh, I wanted to talk through a few of the challenges that exist with getting participants interested in community solar. So I think just to recap what I had said on the previous slide, overall, we heard that the participation experience in community solar was relatively smooth. 2 of the main barriers that grassroots educators mentioned in terms of getting participants interested in the program, the first one was just building trust that the program offerings were legitimate. And grassroots educators noted that, they were a key source of kind of building that trust with communities. And then they also noted that word of mouth was something that could really help people kind of overcome hesitancy to participate in the program. And that was something that was also true for residential solar small. The second barrier that grassroots educators mentioned was just, helping people connect with available subscriptions and knowing when subscriptions for these projects were available. So one of the recommendations we had for kind of addressing that kind of information gap in terms of whether grassroots educators knew that there were subscriptions were available would be to provide a database or live updates for grassroots educators on when community solar projects are built and the timeline for when new subscriptions will be available. The program has previously tried to create a resource like this, and it was a challenge to keep the resource up to date just because the program administrator relied on the approved vendors to let them know when subscriptions were available, and that kind of communication didn't always happen. However, our team thinks that this would still be a helpful resource to allow grassroots educators to connect participants to the program. Finally, the slide shows results for the nonprofit public facilities program, which provides nonprofit and public organizations with on-site solar. These are largely impact-related results for this sub-program. We received limited feedback from grassroots educators on this, but we did speak to nonprofit public facility participants as part of our program year 6 evaluation. So we will share more information about the participation experience during our next webinar. Overall, this sub-program was 41% of installed capacity in program year 5, and it awarded its entire carve-out for both environmental justice communities as well as energy sovereignty projects. Like community solar, we see more broad distribution of these projects throughout the state. And then finally, I wanted to note that bill savings for this sub-program average about $1,679 per month, which is about 50% of nonprofit public facility bills. This group has higher bills on average than residential, the residential segment, but there's also a much wider variation in like how large the bills are, just due to the diversity of buildings and organizations served through this sub-program. Okay, one more thing before I hand it over to IPA. We did receive some feedback on the job training portion of the program. For those who are unfamiliar, approved vendors in Illinois Solar for All are required to hire job trainees who complete qualifying job training programs for a certain number of project hours on Illinois Solar for All projects each year. However, job training programs are not directly run by Illinois Solar for All. Most of them are run through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So as a result, we had a smaller kind of population respond to this portion of the evaluation. One of the main things we wanted to understand was how successful job trainees were in finding solar careers following completion of their job training programs. So as a result of how we sampled, which was based on trainees who had completed project hours on Illinois Solar for All projects, all of the trainees we spoke to had already been hired by approved vendors by the time we spoke to them. So we looked into like how they found those jobs. We found a little over half of trainees found their approved vendor jobs through their job training program. And we also found that most of them continued to work with approved vendors or went on to find related jobs in the same field after working with an approved vendor. So we saw some kind of positive trends towards people being able to build those longer term careers within the solar and energy space. Job trainers also echoed that they tried to support participants in finding jobs. Some of the strategies that they used were aligning their training schedules with seasonal employment demand, as well as cultivating relationships with solar installers. Among job trainers, we heard a little bit of, I guess, not lack of awareness of solar for all, but kind of lack of information about which of their trainees specifically went on to work on Illinois Solar for All projects. So one of the things that job trainers requested was more support in connecting their trainees to potential employers, as well as navigating some of the program requirements. Okay. And before our Q&A period, I'll hand it over to IPA to chat about how they've used evaluation feedback to make updates to the program.
Yeah, so normally in these webinars, we let Illum take the lead on the presentation, but we've received a lot of feedback, concerned that we have recommendations that come to us either through the evaluation or through feedback that may not be utilized by the agency. And so we wanted to take an opportunity to kind of point out where we are able to take these recommendations and implement them to improve the program. So this evaluation report was released a few weeks ago, so the IPA has had some time with it, and wanted to just share some of the things that we've already implemented and some things that we're considering. We have been working with the GEs to provide additional materials and goals within their scope of work and part of their regular check-ins. So these are regular check-ins that the GEs already participate in. And so we're looking at the agenda for those check-ins and making sure that we're maximizing the use of that time with the grassroots educators in one-on-ones and in their pod check-ins where they are sharing information and best practices with each other. We've increased the GE trainings, including technical support in Salesforce. We also have, for a while, we've had weekly office hours for the grassroots educators where we present information, but also it's available for them to ask questions. We have been trying to make a connection between the home repairs pilot and the community solar projects for participants that are not solar ready. We have incorporated a regional environmental justice score in the project selection protocol. So this would be for the project selection protocol for next year for the community solar and nonprofit public facilities sub-programs. And so that's it's not a regional EJ score. We replaced the regional EJ score with a regional prioritization. So it's not looking at the amount of the EJ capacity in that area, but how many projects we have that have been cited in that region before. And so trying to prioritize regions that have not seen a lot of development. We are working with the Illinois Finance Authority through the EPA Solar for All Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund on some additional financial supports. And then some things that are under consideration, we're trying to develop some participant resources that are more focused on the steps and timelines within the sub-program processes. So trying to give a better idea of what the timelines look like for a residential installation. Working towards providing visibility for the GEs into the availability of community solar subscriptions. As Malika mentioned, we've tried to provide this before, but really found a challenge in getting that information from the approved vendors in a timely manner and keeping that information current. But that's something that we do think is an important tool that we would like to be able to provide again, if we can work that out. We've been working with our program administrator on enhancing our data governance and documentation of our data, proposing expanding the list of third-party programs through which income is verified. So this is one change that is in our approved vendor manual draft for the next upcoming year. I think we've added one or two program verifiers. And then finally, we're going to propose reducing redundant inspection requirements. I think right now our proposal is to reduce the photo requirements for inspection, and then we are photo requirements for part 2 application, and then we think we'll be looking at the inspection guidelines and looking at that further in future years, but that has to be in coordination with Illinois Shines. So I just wanted to give a little more information on what we are doing with the recommendations that we get from Illum in these reports. So I will turn it back over to Malika, and I think we have Q&A after this.
Yes, we are now in our Q&A period. We have about 6 minutes left in the formal webinar. I know, yeah. Well, I'll just go ahead and open it up for questions to make sure we have as much time for folks as possible. But I will also review ways to submit comments if you're not able to get your question answered today before we close. All right, so if you have a question, please feel free to come off of mute, or if you're more comfortable, you can drop that into the chat. Okay, everyone's very quiet. Did we cover everyone's questions about community solar earlier? I wanted to make sure we didn't cut that discussion short. Okay, thanks for confirming, Theo. Okay, I'm gonna awkwardly pause for like another few seconds. But if folks are feeling set, here's the awkward pause. Okay, it sounds like there are no more questions. So if anything does come up following the conclusion of this webinar, again, please make use of this either this email address or this form. We're happy to receive input from folks on an ongoing basis. We really want to make sure we're kind of addressing those questions and concerns that are of most importance to the folks who work directly with this program. But since it sounds like we're all set for today, really appreciate everyone's time and engagement, and thanks for letting us share our evaluation results with you. Again, please also look out for a webinar in the next couple of months pertaining to the program year 6 report.
Yeah, thank you, Malika. And we will be posting the recording of this webinar on the IPA website. And I think that should also be going out through the Illinois Solar for All stakeholder email list. So thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.